I think 100 years ago, people would have found it very hard in most cases to appreciate food as art.
Yep.
Beyond your kind of Escoffiers and Carems and the chefs cooking for the kind of royalty, let's say, when they were doing these wonderful, extravagant dining experiences and parties. But I think the general public would have found it very difficult to see food being used as a medium in art. But now, because in the last century, how much more there is and how much more plentiful it is in terms of food, that in a way that's shifted culturally, where we're starting to become more and more accepting of seeing food as not just being represented in art, but food actually being used as art, right? And I think that a lot of that has to do with the fact that despite us looking at the world in terms of there's a limited amount of food and how we're going to feed a growing population, at the same time, I think we're comfortable enough to
play with food.
And I don't think that's something that, even if I think about my grandmother's generation, that wouldn't have been something that was necessarily okay or acceptable, or and I mean on a moral level in a way, because there are starving people. I grew up being told to finish my plate because there are starving kids in Africa. I mean, that
me
was
too.
So and I think kids probably still are being told that. And it's not that there aren't now starving children and adults in many different parts of the world, and it's not that those issues aren't serious and need to be taken care of, but it's interesting that culturally we seem to now be in a place where we're okay about seeing food used as art, and I think that's kind of given rise to exhibitions like this as well.
Yeah, I think there's an interesting distinction between sort of plated food as an art product in some way, or thinking about the actual process of cooking as something creative, because something that several of our artists talked about was people like Michael Rakowitz or Karen Guthrie, Jaslyn Kaur, who've kind of have got sort of fine art careers. They take their first experience of creativity back to being in the kitchen with their mother, and seeing that as an inherently creative process, and being about intimacy and expression and care and all these things that they've wanted to reintroduce into their artwork. So I think, absolutely, in the past it wouldn't have felt morally right to play with your food in some respects, but perhaps that kind of everyday creativity of just kind of getting food on the table and all the skill that actually involved, very often from women on a sort of daily basis. I guess it's about what you count as an artistic process, and how we value some processes and not others. So, is someone painting different to someone creating food? I mean, you can probably argue it lots of different ways, but it's interesting that culturally we prioritize some forms of creativity and value them, and don't